Hi, I'm Cautex, and there was another round of newly discovered warrior talents datamined by wowhead in this week's alpha build. Since I already did a bit of a live react to the Rend and Onslaught changes, I figured rather than doing that again, let's go ahead and actually dig a little bit deeper into these abilities and do some napkin math to try and figure out how much they're actually worth if they were actually implemented in game right now. So, let's get started. The first new talent is Sidearm, which gives your auto attacks a 20% chance to do damage equal to 20% of your attack power to up to 3 enemies. On paper, this seems pretty nice as it gives our auto attacks some AoE scaling. Now, to assess how much DPS you're going to gain from this talent, we need to make some assumptions. In this case, I'm going to be assuming some rather modest gear levels, as the rating conversions for our secondary stats are certainly going to be changing in Dragonflight. I chose to model the damage using my current strength and weapon DPS values to calculate how much attack power that I had, and then once I did that, multiplying it by 20% gives us a baseline damage value of just under 550 damage. Now, I think it's reasonable to assume that these sidearm hits are going to be able to crit, so I calculated the weighted average damage of a sidearm proc based off of having a crit chance of 15%. The next assumption that I made was I'm assuming that the damage will be affected by Enrage. With that in mind, I once again calculated a weighted average, assuming that you had 30% mastery and that you had an enraged uptime of 70%. With these two stats implemented, that brought the average damage of sidearm up to 758 damage per strike. Now, how often sidearm procs is a function of your attack speed. Now, with haste from your gear, as well as haste multipliers such as Enrage, Frenzy, and the fact that it appears that they're going to be re-implementing Cadence as a talent, I decided that an average of 30% haste seemed fairly reasonable. 30% haste brings the default swing timer of 3.6 down to 2.77. And of course, as Fury, you have 2 weapons, so once you account for 2 weapon swings every 2.77 seconds, with a 20% chance to proc, that gives us a ballpark estimate of about 110 DPS on a single target, or 330 DPS on 3 or more targets. Continuing with the theme of making low-end assumptions, right now, median parses on Cautex and Rigalon for Fury are hovering around the 12,000 DPS mark. At this DPS level, gaining an extra 110 DPS is a roughly 1% DPS buff. Now, I'm not going to opine on what percentage DPS increase Sidearm will provide in AoE, because it appears that they're going to be making significant changes to warrior AoE this expansion, so I don't really think it's worth doing any math on that quite yet. Another thing to consider with this talent is that, at least with current weapon scaling, one-handed weapons have about 25% less attack power, but attack 27% faster. This means that Sidearm will scale slightly better for single-minded Fury than it does for Titan's Grip. Doing the same DPS calculations, but assuming that I was using 2 one-handed weapons, Sidearm would yield around 143 DPS instead of 110. Now, on paper, a roughly 1% DPS increase is not really anything to write home about, but it's also worth remembering that I purposely lowballed a lot of the numbers when doing the math. I also didn't even implement versatility, and so in reality, it's not going to surprise me one bit if Sidearm ends up being worth closer to 2% DPS instead of just 1. Given that this is likely to only be a single point talent, whether or not it gets taken is mostly going to depend on how good the other talents around it are and where it's located on the tree. But as of right now, it seems like there is definitely some potential for this talent to be a viable one. The next new talent is Thunderous Roar, which is an AoE cone ability that deals 50% of attack power instantly and puts a 9-second bleed on any of the targets hit, dealing 30% of attack power over that 9 seconds. Currently, the tooltip for Thunderous Roar states that it has a 45-second CD, which is significant because that means that it's going to line up with Colossus Smash, which of course also has a 45-second cooldown, and every other usage is going to line up with Avatar and Recklessness because those are both 90-second cooldowns. It is currently not yet known if this spell is a baseline ability or will it be a talent. And if it was a talent, it's also not known if it's going to be on the base warrior tree or in one of the specialization trees. However, given a talent that I'll be talking about in a little bit, there is reason to believe that arms warriors will have access to this ability. So let's do some napkin math on this ability based on having this as an arms warrior. And let's just take a look and see how much value would this ability provide if it were implemented in the game right now. So I started off my math with my current in-game strength and weapon DPS to calculate my attack power. From this, I was able to calculate a baseline total damage per use of 2011. Given the 45-second cooldown, we should have Colossus Smash up for every Thunderous Roar, which also means Deep Wounds will be up. When accounting for Deep Wounds, I assumed that you had 20% mastery. After that, I did some more weighted averages, and calculated the average damage assuming 25% crit, and then accounted for the fact that every other usage would line up with Avatar. This resulted in Thunderous Roar being worth 4,315 damage per usage, which on a 45-second cooldown means that it would provide roughly 96 DPS. Now, I suspect that the tick rate of the bleed attached to the roar will be affected by haste, which will significantly increase the DPS that it provides. But that can't be ballparked right now because we simply don't know how many times it ticks over that 9-second duration. It's also worth reiterating that this is a conal AoE ability, and there is no language in the tooltip specifying the AoE soft cap on this ability. It's also worth mentioning that the bleed that it applies would likely not be subject to that soft cap, making it even more valuable in AoE. But the thing that makes Thunderous Roar even more interesting is the next talent that was datamined, which is Bloodsurge. This talent is theorized to be an arms talent, and it makes your periodic bleed effects have a chance to grant extra rage. Unfortunately, the only information that we have about this talent is that its spell effect number 1 has a value of 3000, which is mostly meaningless. This could mean that it has a 3 or 30% chance to proc, or it could mean that it generates 3 or 30 rage when it does proc. We don't know. What is plainly obvious, though, is that this is going to make Thunderous Roar much more valuable, and is also going to make Rend much more valuable, especially after the removal of the crit damage modifier. The final newly datamined talent is Blood and Thunder, which makes Thunderclap do 10% more damage, and more importantly, it makes it spread Rend. Now, wowhead has classified this talent as being a protection talent, which is what it was when it was first implemented back in Cataclysm. However, I think there's a world where this talent will show up on the baseline warrior tree as opposed to the prot warrior tree. You see, when the first alpha build was datamined, Thunderclap were found to be uncategorized spells. Core spec abilities, such as Mortal Strike and Rampage, did not show up in this list of uncategorized spells. So, to me, this suggests that it might be possible to talent into Rend and Thunderclap as any spec. And if you can do that, it follows that they would offer Blood and Thunder to all 3 specs as well. Assuming this to be true, this would obviously have some crazy synergy with Bloodsurge for Arms Warriors, and has the potential to majorly alter the way that both Fury and Arms functions in AoE. And well, that's all I got for you. Definitely some very interesting developments, and I still, once again, just simply cannot wait to see what the revamped warrior talents look like. In the meantime, tell me why my opinions are dumb, or tell me what you think about these datamined talents. And lastly, I just want to say thank you for watching this video, and subscribe for more.